Welcome to Business Dig, where we focus on trends, tips, tools, and tales to inform, educate, and entertain. Today, we're going to welcome Rick Lochner, the president of RPC Leadership Associates, where he helps business owners, corporate and nonprofit leadership teams, and individual professionals make leadership a way of life. Rick has authored several books, including I'm Just Sayin', Revelations for Making Leadership a Way of Life, and this was published in 2014. The Missing Piece series for entrepreneurs, published in 2015, Missing Piece for Nonprofit Leaders in 2016, and The Missing Piece for Corporate Leaders in 2017. His most recent release was in 2019, I'm Still Sayin' More Revelations for Making Leadership a Way of Life. And this provides real-world insights that can help us with the shift from holding a leadership position to owning the mindset, taking the actions, and using the practical empathy that true leaders really need in this demanding workforce climate. So I'm Dr. Deborah Fry, Leadership Development Specialist with Fryworks and Associates, and joining me today is my co-host, Lisa Kanda, Marketing Strategist and founder of LK Advisors.
Hello, Deb, and hello, Rick. Welcome, and what a pleasure to see you and welcome you to Business Dig. Rick's a longtime friend of both Deb and mine, and prior to getting onto our recording, we were chatting it up and almost couldn't stop to get the recording going because we were having such a great time catching up. So I am thrilled that you're a part of our series today and look forward to having a great conversation.
Looking forward to it.
Well, Rick, as I mentioned, we share a lot of insights on the dig, and today we're going to focus on that leadership mindset, looking at the capabilities in terms of what our people need now. And Lisa and I have been digging to explore the kinds of tools that can help people during this challenging time, especially habits. We've been thinking in terms of business owners who are balancing all the changes in their companies or organizations as they reopen their doors. And certainly, Rick, you help people align their businesses and keeping success going in their terms, as you often put that in your blogs and in your books.
Right.
I also saw something interesting in your bio that you are working with aspiring young entrepreneurs, high school agers, in the business incubator edu. Is that what you said?
Yes, it's the incubator edu. You playing off of the edu web moniker, but it's a program that it's a national program, but it was introduced to our high school district a couple of years ago, and literally is a class that juniors and seniors take 2 semesters. And they use the lean startup principles, and they literally create businesses throughout the school year and end up presenting in a Shark Tank-like presentation, and real money is involved. Mm-hmm. So it's just helping them become entrepreneurs and coaching and mentoring, groups that literally start businesses while they're still in high school.
I know we have the CEO program here in the southern and central part of our state here in Illinois. You're up there in Chicagoland. One of my good friends runs that down here, and I've been involved in it a little bit. So that's something pretty exciting for a lot of parents, I'm sure, to see their kids be that innovative. So today we're going to look at some of the things that you do as far as fortifying people's leadership skills. And by the way, we're going to provide a link for Rick's books later on in the description for our video. So Rick, thank you for coming on today.
Pleasure. Looking forward to it.
So, I know I'm going to jump in right here. Why don't you tell us, since we're focusing on habits, what are some of the unique challenges you're facing right now? I mean, it's a different time. Are you finding that there's a different approach you need to take, or are things really different than you've seen in the past? Give us some insight to what's going on right now for you.
Well, I think one of the One of the things that we're finding with business owners especially is that the pandemic has been a bit of a truth serum for business owners. One of the things that, as we were talking earlier, I started this business 12 years ago in the middle of the last recession. And so, we learn things, we learn, the shelf life of an excuse when you're trying to start a business especially in trying times. And it caused me to realize that the importance, we talk about the importance of attitude, but there's no greater scenario to prove that out than something like this pandemic and the social unrest that we're going through now. So what it has, I guess, put front and center is how good or where the blind spots are in the way business owners are truly running their businesses. I don't necessarily see any difference in the way businesses should be run pre-pandemic or post-pandemic or during the pandemic. What I see is the pandemic has created a different context in which basic business principles and the discipline that goes with it, things like effective communications, having the right mindset, priority management, all of these things have been part of sustainable business mantra for the last 150 years. The pandemic has just proven whether we're doing it well or not. Yeah. I see a lot of restaurants, for instance, going under. And I know some of these restaurant owners. They weren't running a very good business before the pandemic. The pandemic just proved it. So I think that's part of what all the business owners that I coach is really around what is their mental approach to their business? And as we sit here today, those that are still saying, well, the crisis, the pandemic, and wait a minute, the crisis has been over for a month and a half. I said, it really has, because now we know what we know. Now we know the kind of the left and right boundaries of what's happening. You need to start looking around the next corner and stop worrying about, what's in the weeds. Yeah. And so that's part of the evolution of business in good times. I would maintain and always have that growth is harder than contraction. Because when you contract, you're going back to a place you've already been. Growth, you have to look around that next corner that it's a place you've never been. So it's all part of this process of how strong is your foundation for your business versus are you just managing day to day?
When I'm talking to groups of business owners, very often I'll ask them how much courage it took to get started. Mm-hmm. Because it is the courageous business owner, and anybody that starts out a business knows it took a lot of courage and brute force to start the thing, and to keep it going and to thrive takes that brutal courage that not everybody has that. Not everybody has that.
Right. Well, and the fact that we're talking about habits, one of the habits that I've embraced now going a little over 20 years now is I change something every 6 months. Could be a haircut, switch from coffee to tea. 6 years ago, I taught myself how to write left-handed. So every 6 months, Rick changes something about how Rick does what he does. And I've done that in the professional space in my corporate career as well. Just let everybody know right up front, we're going to change something every 6 months. So we're going to consciously evolve. And what that creates is a habit of adaptability. And that's really, aside from the fact that it kind of tells a cool story when I do my public speaking, but the fact of the matter is, and I even had one of my graduate classes challenge me on it. And so I picked up a marker and wrote left with my left hand and wrote right with my right hand. And at this point, they're almost identical. But the bigger story is creating that adaptability habit. And those that have that habit that can pivot, call it whatever term you want to, but you can't just pivot behaviorally, you have to pivot mentally. And that's why our vision is making leadership a way of life. It's, you have to pivot mentally, you have to adapt mentally in order to stay relevant going forward.
I think that relevancy is really key. You share a lot of insights in your blogs and in your books. And by the way, Rick's books are easy reads. They're a lot of fun, practical stuff for anybody that is looking either to start a business or to change things up. And what I've got to ask you, what inspired you to write I'm Still Sayin'? And tell us a little bit about how that's relevant for leaders and potential leaders right now, making that a way of life.
Sure. Because it's, you know, in the 40 years that I've done what I've done in the military and, you know, Fortune 100, entrepreneurial space, academia, and nonprofit, it, you know, I've seen where the things that matter kind of fall into three major categories. Personal leadership, which is always the beginning, right? You can't lead others if you can't lead yourself. That's where it all starts. And then, of course, we know that the secret sauce in successful business is the strength of your relationships, right? So there's that relational leadership that comes into play. And then, of course, you know, leadership is a team sport at the end of the day. So organizational leadership. So it was, when I write with one of those three major categories in mind. And of course, I'm Still Saying is the second in a series that began with I'm Just Saying. And I say that a lot. I'm just saying, as if doesn't everybody know that, but they don't, but that's okay. So it was my wife's idea actually to name it, call the first book I'm Just Saying, and now I've just played off on that. So the book brings in ideas around personal leadership, relational leadership, and organizational leadership. And of course, as you suggested, you know, feedback from the executives, especially that all my books were written for business owners, executives, executive directors, etc., is that anywhere you open the book, you get the complete idea. You know, starts off with something really, you know, attention grabbing, and then it ends with a call to action question. But it's just 2 pages long. So, you know, it's not the kind of book where you have to start at the beginning and get to the end. You can open it up anywhere for an idea that says, maybe you're struggling with, let's say, time management. I mean, what business owner doesn't struggle with time management? And so, you know, there's a couple of ideas around, there's an article written around, there's no time management issues, just priority management issues, right? Time is time. It's all about priorities versus time. And so this idea of, or the fact that my nonprofit executives, you know, the nonprofit leaders, God bless them, one of the things that they struggle with is saying no, right? So I wrote an article about, you know, your yes means nothing if you can't say no, right? Because once you say yes to everything, they start losing meaning. And so it's those kinds of ideas just to help them in a very quick way to write it in a way that they can relate to, so that when we get to the end of the article and we, you know, how are you doing that? How are you managing your priorities? It gives them something to think about and apply to their set of circumstances. And it's, you know, it's been a very popular seller because it is easy to read and it is relevant. It's not the kind of book that, like my Missing Piece series, which are written for very specific audiences. This is written for the general audience, no matter what you do.
I love how practical you make it, that, you know, sometimes you feel like you have to read the whole book and you provide a tool that just, no, pick it up and find out where you are right now. And boom, you're going to find an answer or some inspiration or motivation, I guess, or whatever you need to address, whether it is time management. And I love that. It is truly a priority issue. And I tell that to people all the time. It's not that you don't have the time. It's just not your priority right now. when are we going to make this your priority? We'll figure that out. Many business owners, Rick, are finding themselves thrust in that leadership role, though. And I know you probably work with many of them who are like, wait a second, I have to be a leader? What does that mean? And that's really different from running the business. You know that. And that can be a real challenge for some business owners because they don't see themselves in that role and know how to navigate and what that means to actually the business itself. What are some top recommendations you could give to help business owners in that transition of experience being a leader in their business?
Sure. Well, the first step is always recognizing that while you may not have thought of yourself as a leader, the fact that you run a business means that you are. Now, we just have to agree that that is the case. Now it's a question of how do you embrace that, right? How do you embrace that mentally? How do you embrace that behaviorally? And I've had business owners who say, well, yeah, I don't need a vision. You know, that's just, you know, corporate poetry. I don't need that. And this is a startup. And then she had to hire her first employee. And guess what the first question that first employee asked? Where is this business going? And she didn't have an answer. And so, you know, that was her first step into realizing that, yes, you are a leader. And you know, when I wrote the missing piece, in this case, in the missing piece for entrepreneurs, it was that in mind. It was kind of the instruction manual, if you will, for business owners who make that transition to leadership, and that all the moving parts have to fit. So the other piece of it is, look, if you don't see yourself as a leader, then, but once we get you to that place where you say, okay, I am a leader, I need to lead this business, not just manage the processes. It's the question I ask now is, how well do you really know your industry? Because that's a challenge, especially for small business owners, because you know, they're juggling 16 plates at the same time, try not to break any. So when do I have time to actually look at trends and that sort of thing? And I said, well, okay, what association do you belong to? And if you belong to an association, how well are they providing you industry trends and the like? How well are you listening to what your clients are telling you? I mean, there's all sorts of intel in what your clients tell you, to the point where you may be missing out on new products and services that you provide if you just listen to what they're doing. But the tool that I find the most useful is taking the business owners through the SWOT synthesis process. I'm a big fan of the SWOT process: strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And the challenge with the way most people do it is they do a SWOT analysis. So essentially they're creating 4 different lists: strength, you know, list of strengths, a list of weaknesses, a list of opportunities, and a list of threats. And then it goes nowhere. None of that is synthesized. And so no context is created. And so when we go through that synthesis process, now they start to see, wow, you know, that now the story unfolds, because now it's in context. Now the opportunities and strengths are in context with something that they can action, that they can take, they can move forward with. And so, but even if it's their first time doing the SWOT, taking them through that process allows them to start naming and identifying with their blind spots, their strengths, their competitive strengths. And especially when I ask them, okay, what strengths do you have that nobody else in your industry has? The second question is always going to be, how do you know? Because I love it when people tell me that they have the best people, the best customer service in the whole wide world. And I said, okay, if I go down the street to the next company that does what you do you think they'll tell me the same thing? And if they do, yours doesn't matter. So it's that kind of conversation that helps them navigate that journey, especially for the first time, from business owner, manager to leader.
And I just want to add one thing into there, Deb. You know, I know you have another follow-up question to that, but the SWOT, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. My experience has been people avoid that. It seems like a daunting task. And I think you've made a really clear case of not only do you have to go through that process, but you have to synthesize what came out of it to make it actionable. And you need a skilled facilitator and consultant who can do that with you. I think that's a real key thing, is because for a business owner to try and do that endeavor on their own, they're not going to have that objective, voice and also the help to get through it, to come to the other side. And I think, that's very insightful that you pull those pieces together. And for business owners listening, it really is key that you find a good consultant or someone who has a lot of experience in working with business owners and leadership to pull the good information out, because it's really critical to moving forward. I agree with you 100%, Rick. So thank you for bringing that point out.
And the thing of it is that it sounds like something that corporate leaders do, right?
Exactly.
And it's so I've created essentially a package for small businesses. I can get you from vision to strategy and SWOT in 6 hours.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, it doesn't have to be, and that's not 6 hours total. That's so we don't interrupt the business. That's 3 2-hour sessions.
Right.
To literally transform from, I'm just trying to survive and make payroll, to now I have a clear sense of direction for where I want to take this business. 6 hours. I mean, that's an investment that I guarantee will pay off, 5-6x in the long run.
Absolutely. And, I quite often ask business owners about what, I know you're familiar, the key success indicators. So what tells you you're successful? Let's take a look at that. And when you're looking at your market, getting that feedback from your market, what are your folks that buy from you? What do they read? What do they listen to? Where do they get their information? When they're shopping for this, where do they look? What magazines do they look at? Are they reading magazines?
Right. Magazine, what's that?
What website? But getting people to stop for a second and get outside of themselves, get outside of their day-to-day stuff, stop for a second and think about a few of your customers and where are they going? What are they doing? What do they want? And then think about, all right, my competitors, who are they really? And a lot of times people are surprised when they do that SWOT analysis, when they start to do their marketing work with me. I can take that, like you, I have little packages that I've put together for examining your market, helping you become better at finding who your market is, and then redefining who your market is. Go to that next target market. Who are those people? And it is amazing how many times the owners, and I'm sure you've experienced this, go, wow, I hadn't really looked at it that way before. I didn't realize what my competition actually was until now. And sometimes they're actually shocked. Holy cow, now what am I going to do? We have solutions for that, right? So
yeah, exactly. Well, rule number one, especially with a business owner, is helping them get out of their own way.
Yeah.
And, I've pretty much every business owner I've ever worked with, at some point in the coaching process, I've said, if you don't carve out some time to think strategically about what you're doing, whether it's pre, post, or during a pandemic or a recession, you're not doing your job. Simply put.
That's right.
However time that is, but you have to carve out that time. Gets back to priorities. People say, well, I don't have time. You got 24 just like me.
Yeah.
And so what you're really saying is you're not making the time. And
Rick, before we ring off, I want to ask you about something I saw in one of your books about making good B+ decisions.
yes.
You talk about the B+ decisions. Leaders must get comfortable making the right decisions without the luxury of all the information. And we're talking about this information, recommending some things for long-term success. How do they do those B+ decisions?
It's an interesting concept, right? It's first of all, it freaks perfectionists out when I even mention that, right? So
I'm there. I've had to learn that hard lesson. Trust me.
There's a piece of advice that I got early on in my Sprint career from an executive, and it stuck with me ever since. The first thing that all business owners have to realize is that not all decisions are created equal. And based on that, they don't have to make them all, right? So that's step one. You go back to our previous conversation around the SWOT and having a sense of direction and the like. And so when you have no sense of direction, every decision feels onerous. It's like, is this a good decision? Is it a bad decision? But those businesses that have visions, that have a clear sense of their story, that have a clear strategy for how they're going to approach, get to the other side of the pandemic, at the front of the line. Now every decision has a point on the horizon that it can map to, and that makes the decision easier. It also makes the decision to not do these other things easier. I read an article in Psychology Today about what they call uber taskers. Now, we all know that the brain can't consciously multitask. So it's just impossible. So, but you have, we've all met these people that look like they're doing 62 things at one time and not breaking a sweat. You know what their secret is? Their secret is they know how to say no to the non-essential stuff. And that in itself is a decision. But if you can't make that decision, that's really one of the key decisions that you have to make, right? Is what you're not going to do. But the only way you can do that is to have a sense of direction of where you're taking the business and what's the end game, what's the goal. Goals give us left and right boundaries for making those kinds of decisions. So it's easy to make a B+ decision, which essentially means, when you have 80 to 85% of the information, call it. And then figure the other 15% out on the fly, right? Because the world just moves that fast. And you don't have the luxury of getting 100% of the information you need before you make that decision. So it's really just a combination of, with that sense of direction that gives you a point on the horizon that you can steer all the right decisions that you need to make. And then, of course, the next decision all business owners eventually need to make is, what are you going to delegate? I've got several clients right now, right in the middle of that process, figuring out what they're going to out-task, what they're going to outsource, what they're going to take off their plate as they continue to grow their business, because they realize they simply can't make all those decisions themselves.
That's right.
I agree. Just tons of great gems of information here. Thank you, Rick. It's just been an amazing short. It went so fast, right? It goes always so fast. I know anyone who's listening is going to just walk away with all kinds of great actionable tips and gems to take. I know I did. Every conversation I have with you, I take away some awesome tips and ways I can move my business forward and continue to be a leader in my business. So I so appreciate that. So I want to, of course, thanks to our listeners for investing their time with us today. We hope that our conversation with Rick Lochner has been enlightening and helpful for our business builders out there. In Rick's book, Still Sayin More Revelations for Making Leadership a Way of Life, he gives us practical methods to embrace a leadership mindset. It's now available on Amazon, and we'll make sure there is a link in the description so you can grab your copy, because you just pick it up and there's going to be a quick tip in there to get you exactly where you need to in that moment. Very actionable, very quick to read, and as all his books are, so make sure you grab a copy of that. Solopreneurs, entrepreneurs, business owners, and our listening audience, do you have a story, technique, strategy that may help others in their quest for success? Please share with us by sending your interests, suggestions, and comments to our email at businessdig@gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you and your success stories and insights. You can also comment on our Facebook business page, key in Business Dig, and in the search bar, and you'll find us. We cannot wait to hear from you. Thank you, Rick. Thank you to my co-host, Deb. It was a fabulous, very fast conversation, and we know our listeners will get a lot from it. Join us next time for a Business Day with Lisa Kanda and Deborah Fry. Thanks.